Hello, thank you for being here. Do I have slides? Good. How many of you have already heard of Zcash before now? Okay, good. And how many of you know how zero knowledge proofs work? Oh, good. More, yeah, it's good. Okay, I have 20 minutes, right? More or less. And questions? Yeah? I have 19 minutes and 20 seconds, and plenty of questions. Oh, yeah. Okay, so our mission is to empower everyone with economic freedom and opportunity. And that's simple enough. And the reason we got started on this many years ago is a bunch of scientists had come up with a scientific innovation with which you could put private information into a public blockchain. And those scientists approached me and asked if I wanted to help implement it and make it like fully production scale and deployable to the whole internet. And one of the reasons they approached me was that I had done implementation of cryptography before. And the other reason was that they knew that I cared a lot about privacy. So I think privacy is really fundamentally important. I think, and everyone who now works on Zcash probably would agree with me, that privacy is fundamental to human nature. It's a human right, and it's part of dignity. And you know, sometimes you can't be yourself unless you're alone. Sometimes if you have a really important decision to make, you need to be alone. And sometimes you need to be with others. You need to be with your friends or with your lover. And you can be yourself or a different version of yourself when you're with those people, when you're in front of those people. But you can't be yourself when you're in front of some faceless, powerful entity who's scrutinizing you and whom you have no power over. And we're currently undergoing a radical experiment in putting everyone and entire populations into that position where they can't be themselves and make their own moral choices. And that's wrong and it's dangerous. And the reason it's happening is either because some governments think you can't be trusted to make your own decisions, or some mega corporations need to make their quarterly results, so they need to squeeze another half of a cent out of you. So we can't expect the process to slow down because those two things aren't going to change anytime soon. So when these scientists approached me 4 years ago now, I thought, here's our opportunity to do something. And then I thought, oh, but it won't work because most people don't understand the importance of privacy, so most people will continue to use the non-private alternative. And then, so I initially turned them down. I said, oh, I'd love that, but it's not like we can't do what we want to do unless we get the mass mainstream population to do it with us, right? Privacy is a social good, not an individual good. So originally I turned them down, but then I called them back the next day and said, no, wait, I can do it. And the reason I changed my mind is because I realized privacy is necessary for commerce. So now that pressure of commercial profit making we can use for the side of good. So that's why we started the Zcash project. Who all understands how HTTPS works? Well, everyone understands what it does. You know the difference between HTTP and HTTPS? So in the 1990s, when the World Wide Web was new, it used HTTP, and HTTPS did not exist when it was new. And if you used the web back then, any hacker who had access to any of the internet computers or your Wi-Fi or whatever would be able to see the contents of what you were doing on the web, right? And in the 1990s, some cryptographers and entrepreneurs and idealists and social activists invented ways to deploy encryption to everyone. And one of those ways was HTTPS. And which, of course, if you use HTTPS to connect to the web, now you have, access to everything you're doing. You know what you're doing. Your browser shows you your history and everything. And the web server you're connecting to has access to everything, but any hackers in the middle don't. That's the only difference. And when HTTPS came out in the 1990s, the United States government initially tried to ban it. Did you know that? How many people already knew that? Like, oh, yeah, see, I'm getting old. A lot of people don't even know that when I was 20 years old, HTTPS came out, and the United States government, not the whole government, but one faction within the United States government, was afraid that it would, like child pornographers would use it, and terrorists would use it, and drug dealers would use it, and so therefore, and they wouldn't be able to enforce laws anymore, and so therefore they tried to prevent HTTPS from being deployed and prevent people from using it. And they failed. There was a long struggle involving some courageous activists and some courageous entrepreneurs and a bunch of policy makers arguing about it. And after this long struggle, they failed to ban it. It started getting used because people needed it to protect themselves when they were using the World Wide Web, especially for commerce. That was like the first application of it. There was a time when you would use normal old HTTP to browse websites, and then you would switch to HTTPS to go to your bank website. That was the first reason, the motivation that got the foot in the door. And now, ironically, the same United States government has laws that require you to use HTTPS to protect customers if they're accessing your website or using your tools. So they've come full circle. So this is most blockchains. You make some actions, and then everyone who has the ability to see that blockchain, which is everyone in the world for public blockchains, is able to view a record of your actions. And this is what we've been working on for the last 4 years and more, is making it so that encryption protects your activities from unauthorized parties seeing what you've done. Okay, briefly, so Bitcoin is a revolutionary, amazing thing, but the revolutionary part is not the way money works. The revolutionary part is getting all the nodes in the world to simultaneously agree on the current state of a spreadsheet. And once you have a censorship-resistant, decentralized spreadsheet, then you can implement money in it by this. So when you look at the Bitcoin blockchain, you see an address of a sender and the address of the recipient and the amount of money they sent. And all the miners or full nodes have to verify that this is a correct row, that by doing this, you're not double spending money or inventing, like spending money you don't have or anything like that. And so in Bitcoin, the way the miners and full nodes validate that is that they basically trace backwards through the entire history. They say, oh, this ID that starts with 183, it's trying to, or sorry, this ID that starts with 1EB, it's trying to send 1 Bitcoin. And is that money that it doesn't have, or is that money that it's previously spent? And so it traces back and it looks for all previous times that 1EB spent money and all previous times that 1EB received money. So that works to ensure integrity, to prevent invalid transactions from being added, but it's a complete failure of privacy. And in the early days, some people mistakenly thought that the fact that 1EB is just an arbitrary string instead of being like your name or your home address would protect you. but that's wrong. As we now know, that doesn't protect you. Privacy invasive techniques and modern sophisticated data science and so forth make it very easy to link people's arbitrary addresses to their identity. This is analogous to back in the early days of the internet. People thought if you use the internet, you have privacy because IP addresses are just 4 numbers with dots between them, and your name is not in your IP address. But now we know you need to do a lot more sophisticated technology to protect yourself from being traced than just using the internet. Okay, so Satoshi and Hal Finney and others, when they were inventing Bitcoin, talked about if they could apply encryption to prevent the miners and the full nodes from being able to discern the activities of the users. And they couldn't figure out how to do it because that was way back in like 2009 or so, I think. And way back then, scientists had not yet discovered efficient enough zero-knowledge proofs. Okay, so here's the thing. If you encrypted, this is what Satoshi and Hal talked about on the mailing list, is if you encrypted this content so that the miners and the full nodes wouldn't be able to violate the privacy of the users, how would the miners and the full nodes be able to differentiate between valid and invalid transactions? And they couldn't come up with a solution back then. But that's what these scientists who approached me 4 years ago had come up with. They'd come up with these really efficient zero-knowledge proofs. And with zero-knowledge proofs, you can change it to this setup. You have really strong modern encryption, like probably just as strong as HTTPS in the sense that no government and no hacker and no scientist in the world knows how to break it. And then you use that to encrypt all of the private information about what you're doing. So with this style, if you get paid in Bitcoin, your paycheck, and then you go to a coffee shop and you buy coffee from your paycheck, now your employer knows where you spend your money and the coffee shop owner knows what your salary is. Now with this one, they don't. You can get paid in Zcash, and then you can go to the coffee shop and spend that Zcash for coffee, and this doesn't expose anything else about your activities to the person you're interacting with, only what is relevant to them. But we needed this new column over here, which is the zero-knowledge proof. That is to ensure integrity. That's a cryptographic construct that proves to all the miners that the encrypted contents inside here don't double spend money and don't spend money that the sender doesn't have. Okay, this is what it was about 4 years ago, I think, that the scientists first approached me. And 2 years ago, like about 2 weeks before LABITCONF 2016, we launched Zcash as a live blockchain. So now it's a grizzled veteran, 2 whole years old, which I think is really funny how people think of this as experienced and mature in this space. So Zcash has grown and performed well in those 2 years. And just now, about a month and a half ago, we announced the first, we completed and deployed to the live network the first major upgrade, which improves the CPU time to generate the encrypted transactions. In the first version of Zcash that we launched 2 years ago, that took about like 40 seconds to generate the encryption, which kind of reminds me of how in the early days of HTTPS, one of the reasons why people kept using HTTP was that HTTPS used up more CPU on their server. But then we eventually fixed that and made HTTPS faster and faster until everyone started using it everywhere. Similarly with Zcash, I'm really proud of this because I've been working up to this like for decades, and several of the cryptographers on my team have been working up to this forever. And over the last 2 years, we made this really great improvement in the fundamental cryptography, and we dropped the runtime from 40 whatever seconds to about 2 seconds. Thanks. So this is really exciting. This just happened like in October 28th, the 2-year anniversary of Zcash was the deployment of this new system. And now the next step is that part about everyone deploying it everywhere. Like I said about how everyone eventually switched over to using HTTPS for more or less everything, but it took a long time. Hopefully it won't take that long for this transition. So real quick, because I really want questions. I hope you have questions. And we have 4 minutes, so I'm going to finish up. You'll sometimes see or read in newspapers that Zcash is incompatible with regulatory compliance, and that's wrong. There's a lot of complexity, as you know, from 3 panels or one panel twice and another panel, but there's a whole lot to say about regulation of all kinds of blockchains and cryptocurrencies in all kinds of countries. It's very, very complicated. But to way oversimplify it, it goes like this. There's a whole bunch of confusing, unclear, contradictory things happening in all the countries, and cryptocurrencies are, to oversimplify, they're basically banned in India and China. And the surprising thing you should be aware of is that cryptocurrencies are basically approved in the United States. In particular, the really surprising thing that most people don't know is that the leading regulators in the United States recently, decided, granted permission to their regulated companies. And what they granted was that those companies are allowed to use Zcash. That Zcash is one of the 7 or so approved coins in the United States, including the HTTPS version, including the encryption feature. So that's the thing that I most want everyone in the world to realize they have a mistaken, confused assumption, is when they think that Zcash is incompatible with regulation. That's false. And I could go into exactly why for like 30 more minutes if you want. Okay, and then as part of that, we see that these companies, which are regulated by their local government or their national government, have added Zcash. All of the companies up here have added Zcash. The most recent one is Coinbase. I'm really excited about that. They just listed Zcash like a week or so ago. And that's evidence. Remember, the next time you hear somebody saying privacy coins, something, 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 regulation, something, say to yourself, but wait a minute, didn't Coinbase list Zcash? Yes, Coinbase listed Zcash because it's legal in the United States. Okay. By the way, Ripio is awesome, and they're expanding to more countries. Plug for Ripio. Okay, that's my whole talk. Privacy is really important. We're making this really cool technology that can really help people, and it's becoming more and more widely used and successful. And Coinbase listed it, so it's not illegal in the United States. Thank you.
Okay, you have time for some questions. Okay.
I have time for questions?
Yeah. There.
But you got to use a microphone, right?
We will do 2 if it's short the question or short the answer.
Okay.
How would you compare Zcash with other privacy coins like Dash or Monero?
A big difference, to me, I come from science and engineering, so my first answer is it's much better engineered, it's much safer for use and more applicable to different kinds of use cases and stuff. That's my main answer. It's really high quality.
Okay. Just for the middle. Yes.
So what are your thoughts on proof of stake for Zcash and layer 2 on Zcash?
It's going to be really hard to answer that one quickly. And if I answer quickly, then we're allowed 2 questions.
But you need to answer that one.
But
I'm sorry.
If I answer slowly,
No,
we've already got the 2 questions. Now I can take all the time I want to answer this one.
Well,
Proof of stake. Well, I think proof of stake's a great idea, and we should definitely investigate it. I've been waiting and waiting for Ethereum to launch it first so we could see how it works there and then learn from them. But I don't know if they're going to get around to that.
Okay, just one more. There at the back. There. Yes. The last one. Yeah.
Yes, my question was that, for example, for Zcash, given that the privacy or the private transaction are optional, if you think that undermines the whole privacy compared to other currencies like Monero, for example, where privacy is by default, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I agree. It definitely does. Though the worst thing about Zcash is that the privacy is optional. There are two different kinds of addresses. The shielded kind of addresses, which give you all the privacy I've been talking about, and the unshielded kind of addresses, which are like backward compatible HTTP style addresses. And we did that deliberately because we thought it would be worth it to get everyone to onboard easily. Because if you're like an exchange or a wallet maker or the maker of an online game or service or hardware device or whatever, you can implement the backwards compatible kind very, very easily because it's just a simple clone of Bitcoin. And then after you do that, then we can persuade you to upgrade to the shielded kind. So that was the intent, and it's pretty much working. We did get a whole bunch of people of different companies and services to support Zcash using the easy on-ramp, and now some of them are upgrading to the more secure version. But the answer to your question was, doesn't that make it less secure than something like Monero, in which the default is private? And I agree, it totally does, because normal users get confused and don't realize whether they're using the shielded version or the other version. So our intent is to get everyone to upgrade to the shielded version and then kill off the unshielded version, which again is like what happened with HTTP. It took 20 years with HTTP, but hopefully we can do it in a lot faster with Zcash. Thank you.
And that's it.